So when we're talking about biomechanics, talking about sort of gait analysis, there's a couple of sort of main ones we'll go over, and that's rear foot and forefoot strikes. So you can see the runner on the left here is striking with their rear foot, and then the runner on the right is, you can slightly see it, but he's or she's striking with their forefoot. Rear foot runners land on the lateral heel first. That's the initial point in contact when they're striking, and that's the most common way to run. So yeah, 80% of runners run with a rear foot strike. More energy is absorbed at the knee, if you can sort of imagine there. And then the forefoot runners are landing on their lateral forefoot, and that is only 1 to 2% of runners run with their forefoot. The rest are sort of in between. And forefoot runners, more energy is absorbed at the ankle. So it's interesting. A lot of people think that forefoot runners have less injury rates, but there's actually no difference in injury rates between the two runners. It's just the only difference is where the injury is at. So rear foot runners tend to get more injuries at the knee, and forefoot runners tend to get more injuries at the ankle. The other one I'd like to talk about today is proximal runners and overstriding runners. So proximal mechanism is when there's a lot of hip adduction and there's a small window between their knees. And we'll talk about that more in a second. And then there's overstriders who are taking big, long strides. And we'll talk about that coming up soon. So we go back. So both of these proximal and overstriding mechanisms can potentially result in injuries, and but there has to be a training load error first. So patellofemoral pain, the reason why that sort of comes up with runners who use a proximal mechanism. As you can see with the runner on the left, there is a contralateral pelvic drop. Add that in with a bit of hip adduction and hip internal rotation with creating that small window between the two knees. This sort of photo of the knee and the kneecap is around the wrong way, I believe, for this runner. Should be the right knee. Yes, but you can imagine, so hip adduction, hip internal rotation, and contralateral pelvic drop. We'll see the femur, the kneecap on the femur sort of track a little bit laterally, and that will sort of manifest into patellofemoral pain. So IT band, similar mechanism. So we've got that contralateral hip drop, hip adduction and internal rotation. That is then we've got impingement of the IT band right next to the lateral femoral condyle though. So there's I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can imagine, I guess, a little bit of gapping at the tibia femoral joint. So that lateral edge is getting compressed, and the impingement occurs with the IT band. Any questions with those two?
Anik?
Yeah, I guess with the ITB band, do you mean like there's do you still call it friction syndrome? Because I think because I think what I read in most recent literature is that the friction of the ITB is most likely not really what's causing the issue, but it's the compression of the bursa that's lying underneath. Right. So it's more of like a compression impingement syndrome rather than like an ITB friction.
Rather than a friction, right? Yeah.
Which would also really make sense in terms of, if you look at the innervation that a bursa has, it would really make sense why it can get so irritable rather than like the ITB band is really just like a super tendinous sheet. Like there's not
exactly.
In terms of release and that sort of stuff, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
So if you really think about that friction, I think that might be something we need to really step off of a little bit and really think about more that sort of compression force that happens on that versa.
Oh,
Yeah.
can I jump in? Bloody hell. Am I talking yet? I love that. This is why I wanted to get on things, to get controversial conversations. I totally agree with you, Nick. I've been saying that for years. The iliotibial band is a sheet. It's, for when I'm sounding like a dinosaur. When I graduated 8 years ago, they were thinking it was the cause of everything. But I hope these mechanics show you that, first of all, you always have to keep up to date to see what might be the true cause of it. Like we got taught that friction as well. And like you said, Anik, it's still hypothetically, we're still thinking this is much more likely. Until they get more conclusive studies, it's going to be hard to, differentiate exactly what it is, but it does make a lot of sense. But what I'm seeing from these presentations is that there's clear biomechanics which are leading to these symptoms, and if they aren't addressed, they're just going to keep happening regardless of what's there. Does that make sense? Does anyone else have any thoughts? Just unmute yourself and chat. Anik, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if, not just for running injuries, but I think for a lot of injuries, we actually don't really know what's the exact cause, and I'm not sure if we're ever going to find out for like most injuries. But I think the most important thing is that we start telling our patients what we really know, and what we think is going on, but also explain like why that might differ, or why. I have a lot of people coming in that just say, "Oh yeah, my ITB is too tight," and then you need to start thinking about, what do you want to explain somebody about their injury? But that's really hard because half the time you don't really know what's going on exactly because there's no conclusive evidence. I find that like a really, really difficult path to sort of walk. Like what do you really tell your patients? Because do you actually know what's going on?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Anik, because the next few tutorials we have, we actually wanted to talk to you guys about effective communication skills and how to effectively take messages across to your patients and to tell them the right things at the right time. But I think that humility to understand that no, there's no silver bullet. We don't necessarily know the exact thing, but this is what we believe is going on. This is what we're going to work with, and this is what we believe will help you. I think it's really important. Dave, because I haven't spoken to you yet. Dave, unmute yourself for a sec, bud. Have you do you have any thoughts about this around your tibial band? And I know you have a big exercise background. Yeah.
Well, I had experience myself during my time in the military. I had some ITB problems, and I was fixing it while I was in the military with physio. But I'm not treating that much right now ITB syndromes with runners. I didn't see that much, but as I agree with what Anik said. I think it's not like friction; it's more compression. So it's definitely, I think, the research should go. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
I was something that before about the heel strike and forefoot. There's also a midfoot actually. I was wondering what's your opinion on. You have like the heel strike and the forefoot, but you also have the midfoot that's kind of maybe neglected.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit neglected there, but I suppose with the midfoot, there's no a predominant area of injury, I guess. But with everything else, there's load would be the two predominants, two determinants of injury there. I suppose the midfoot doesn't have like a preference for ankle or knee injuries.
Yeah, cool. Just some really good points there. Thank you. That answer your question, David. Cool. Just to summarize, there's all these different mechanics, but I really want to go back to our next point of just keeping it simple, going back to your exact causes and things like that, but we can work with the evidence that's in front of us. And when I talk about evidence, I'm talking about the running style, I'm talking about muscles that are tight, muscles that are weak, and helping you work out how to work things through there. Keep going, Joe.
No, why is there impingement there, Eyes?
Sorry? Why isn't there?
Impingement there?
Why isn't there what impingement there?
Why is the word impingement there? Staring me in the
Either. Yeah, well, I'll have to ask Jack that. I didn't do the master class.
I didn't write it.
These are obviously we'll have to email Tim at the Physio Network and call him on it. James, a smart ass.
It's interesting because you're talking about
to say that
bursa around that band, and a lot of the things when we talk about impingement in the shoulder, impingement of the shoulder, it's to do with the irritation of the bursa in the shoulder. So I find that pretty interesting that we're talking about bursa now around the knee when there's a lot of evidence talking about the bursa being what's irritated in the shoulders for a lot of subacromial compressions and things like that. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. And it's always, like you said, James, about keeping up to date and looking at more relevant things, because things always are changing. But I think we're onto something here. Keep going. Keep going, Jack.
Talking about tibial stress fractures now. So bones are really good to adapt to compression, but they don't really like tension, as opposed to tendons. They they get sort of irritated. But as you can see here with that sort of lateral area is getting a little bit of maybe a bit more pressure at the medial end is getting a little bit more gapping. You can see potential for the a little bit beyond the tibial stress fracture.
Just purely out of interest, like I'm not sure how many of you see like a lot of runners, but how many of these injuries have you actually seen working as a physio?
Well, I'd say Jack just going to start. Do you want me to answer? I've seen most of them, but these are highly much more rare. Of course, you saw the statistics around what the most common things are, but they're not to be missed, I guess, Anik, which is really important. So while being rare, like I've picked up stress reactions and stress fractures where other physios have not. And it's just about understanding that, sometimes it was like long-standing night pain that was throbbing around the area, that focal bony tenderness. They do happen. Females, of course, we know about the female athlete triad, so important when you're dealing with female runners that we're not missing things. As you all know, hormonal regulation is such an important factor in it. So while rare, Anik, I guess important just not to be missed, and to just look at that whole picture, which is why taking, I think, a thorough history and asking questions, even maybe, I don't say outside our scope, but just understanding everything as to what's leading to it is very important.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I know sometimes in Holland, when you have those 20-minute consults, you just have to race through as much as you can. And sometimes, you might in your history not get as much as you'd like, but just let you plant that seed there, because that's how I've picked up on all of those things. Yeah,
just going off what I've said, they are rare, but 2 to 8% of runners will get a tibial stress fracture, and 70 odd percent would be female. So it's just understanding the athlete and not missing it. Proximal mechanism, talking about gluteal tendinopathy. So with that lateral pelvic tube and the contralateral pelvic drop, I guess we're stretching the glute med tendon there. So, and that's rubbing along the bone. So that's getting compressed with the RT band, from the RT band, causing that tendinopathy. So just another mechanism for another injury, that proximal mechanism. So overstriding. Overstriding can result in a number of injuries. Going through them here: ITB strain, patellofemoral injuries, increasing plantar loads, tibial stress. I just moved my thing. Increase of hamstring forces there as well. We'll talk about a couple of them now. And I guess with overstriding, you might not have this high-tech equipment in your practice to really notice it, but seeing an athlete run, and if they're having that high vertical oscillation, so if they're bouncing up and down with each stride, it's a good indication of they're taking too longer strides while they're running. So talking about hamstring tendinopathy now, you see this lady here's running and she's taking a big long stride out, and an increase of that hip flexion angle will have a bit of a stretch on the hamstring tendon behind the ischial tuberosity there. So the biceps femoris tendon is going to get compressed around and irritated, and a possible tendinopathy occurs.